friends. Welcome to Foggy Oak Fairy Tales, a stories podcast for all ages, where we tell farm stories from real life happenings on Foggy Oak Farm, as well as fantasy tales to spark both learning and imagination. I'm so glad you're here. This episode is about pigs. Specifically, it is about 3 recent additions to Foggy Oak Farm, Pua, Petunia, and Peaches, who are part of the many spring animal expansions we have done this season. Pua, Petunia, and Peaches are Kunekune pigs, which is a breed originally from New Zealand. Kunekune means fat and round in Maori, and you may recognize this breed from Moana's pet pig, the Pua, for whom our Pua was named. I assume the Moana version of Pua is a relatively young pig because while adult Kunekunes are smaller than many other breeds, they are still quite a bit larger than Moana's friend Pua might lead you to believe. Adult Kunekunes range from about 130 to over 400 pounds. So you're not going to be carrying them around like a small dog once they are grown. On our farm, Pua and Petunia are both adult females, and they're both heavier than our very large dogs. Petunia is probably at least 175 pounds, while Pua is likely well over 200. Peaches, who is Petunia's daughter and Pua's niece, is about a year and a half old, and she is not yet 100 pounds, so she definitely still has some growing to do. Kunekunes are about 2 feet tall when fully grown, and their coats have some fun color variety. The most common colors you'll see are black and white, brown, gold, tan, and cream, sometimes with spots added in for good measure. Moana's Pua is of the white with black spots variety. All 3 of our Kunekune ladies have a lovely sprinkling of spots, though their coats are a bit different in main color. Pua is a pale gold, Petunia is more of a medium gold, and Peaches has the richest, warm, deep gold as her main color. So gold it's almost orange. Kunekune pigs also have something called tassels, or piri in Maori, which are little dangly round wattles that hang on each side of their chin. Both Petunia and Peaches have them, and these give them sort of a silly look, especially when you combine them with their short, upturned snouts that they like to waggle when looking at you. We decided to add Kunekunes because one very unique thing about them is they are a true grazing pig. Unlike many pig breeds that will mostly just root around in the earth for tree roots, grubs, and other things that are primarily under the ground, Kunekunes will actually graze on grass and help maintain your pastures, which is something we especially need help with at this time of year when everything is exploding with new growth. They don't really root or dig around in the ground much, though they do need pig-specific food in addition to grazing. They can't make it on just grazing alone. So we also feed them in the morning and evening. And boy, do they come running. And boy, can they run. Probably faster than me. Okay, almost certainly faster than me. When they are ready for breakfast or dinner, they will gallop across the pasture to get to you. The youngest, Peaches, gets so excited that she invariably squeals with eagerness and impatience. It's rather loud and can be a little startling because she is extremely insistent once she realizes it's food time. I'm getting used to it. But while they may get pretty excited when it comes to food, in general, Kunekunes are known for being friendly, intelligent, and enjoying close human contact. We weren't entirely sure what to expect, but this has proven to be completely true. If you walk up to Pat, Pua, or Petunia and you move your hand anywhere near their belly, both of them will give a pleased "umph" and immediately flop themselves onto the ground so they can raise their belly to you for a tummy rub. They will stay like that for as long as you care to give them a belly rub. They love scratches behind their ears, and I often find them all hanging out in the water trough cooling off together, where they will grunt at me to spray them down with the hose so they can get even more cool and wet. Not something I was used to with my past experiences with pigs. I wasn't sure if they would like the hose, but when I went to fill up the water trough they were sitting in, they kept moving their faces under it. So I finally was like, okay, fine, I'll try. And sure enough, they love being hosed off. Really feels good to them. And in addition to just liking the water, this is because pigs don't sweat. So they use this, the cool water of the water trough or mud, as a way to regulate their body temperature. Another thing we weren't sure about when we brought these pigs home was how well they would integrate with the other animals at Foggy Oak Farm. Would they be nice to the chickens? Or would they maybe try to eat them? Would the goats boss them around? Or would they boss around the goats? Would they be afraid of the dogs? The questions went on, and we've only had them for about 2 months, but we've started to answer many of them. The pigs are nice to the chickens, and the chickens are now happy to hang out with them. When the pigs first arrived, the chickens were rather alarmed and definitely horrified by them. Our guineas, which are a kind of African version of a chicken, were particularly displeased and stood outside the fence of the pig pasture, absolutely screaming at them for hours. The pigs, on the other hand, were utterly unconcerned by the upset chickens and just went about the business of walking the pasture perimeter to learn their boundaries and begin to graze on the tender spring grass. They did not care, and eventually the chickens didn't care either. The dogs, seeing the pigs pacing the perimeter of the pasture, also lost their minds. They had not seen a pig before. They had never conceived that such a thing as a pig could exist, and perhaps thought we had brought in an alien species of dog rather than a new type of farm animal. One of our dogs, Orion, was so unnerved and excited that he tried to climb over the fence to go check them out. So we realized rather than waiting to integrate and introduce them, we needed to quickly take care of introductions so that everyone would calm down. We didn't know if these pigs had been around dogs, so we were careful to bring ours in one at a time to meet them. However, all 5 of our dogs had the same reaction. They would try to bound up to the pigs, tugging us along on the leash. They would get one good look at them, take one big sniff, and then immediately jump backwards and become completely tentative and shy. These animals, they quickly realized, were not dogs. Decidedly not dogs. They were something else. And the pigs, for their part, thankfully, were as utterly unconcerned about the dogs as they had been about the chickens. They did not care at all. They barely acknowledged the dogs. If the pigs had run, or if they had acted frightened, then we really would have had our work cut out for us because that would have taught the dogs they should chase them. But as it was, they just kept grazing, basically pretended the dogs didn't exist, and the dogs, as a result, had no idea what to do. They each would eventually cautiously approach the pigs again to sniff and sometimes give them a lick, and the pigs would resolutely ignore them. Smart pigs. This went a long way towards resolving the dog's curiosity. For a few days, Orion would still bark and cry through the fence at them when they came close, but they continued to simply ignore him, and he has largely accepted that now there are 3 big not dogs that live in the pasture next to him and who are inexplicably uninterested in his existence. The goats have been a bit of a different story. We've taken over one of the barn stalls to raise bottle baby lambs this spring. More on that in another episode. And so the goats and pigs were having to share the remaining stall while the lambs grow a little bit. We started by keeping the goats in another pasture for a couple of weeks while the pigs got acclimated, and then we introduced everyone. There has been what I would call a cautious détente. The pigs will not allow the goats to come near them during feeding time, but the goats and pigs will settle down in the stall together at night if they must. When the weather is nice, I mostly see both groups sprawled out in the pasture enjoying the spring air. However, I will note that Petunia seems to enjoy deviling the goats. Before feeding time the other day, David came out to find her running merrily along behind the goats as she chased them, all over the pasture. Not biting them, not hurting them, just chasing them as if she was playing tag. It's unclear to us if the goats knew they were playing tag, but Petunia definitely did. Anytime the fainting goats would freeze up during the run, she would stop behind them and patiently wait for them to unfreeze so that she could resume chasing them. I hope it's a game the goats will begin to enjoy too, because it's clear that Petunia at least has no desire to give it up. And speaking of chasing, I'll leave you with one other anecdote that happened just last night. Part of our pasture fence by my parents' house had begun leaning, which we didn't realize until we got home and found one of the goats, Sunshine, had jumped over it and was hanging out over in my parents' yard. David and I grabbed a metal fencing post called a T-post driver, which is like a big metal tube you use to pound the post into the ground, and some clips to attach the T-post to the sagging part of the fence. We walked out into the pasture with our supplies to make the repair, and of course encouraged Sunshine to jump back over the fence. And Pua decided to trot along with us to see what we were doing. Pigs are, by their nature, also very curious animals. We weren't sure if Pua would like the noise and fuss of the fencing repair process, but we figured she would just leave and go back to Petunia and Peaches if she didn't like it. We were a little bit wrong about that. We got the T-post into position and David started banging it into the ground. All seemed fine at first until he paused and Pua sort of chased him like she chases the goats. Not squealing, not biting, but not seeming very happy and definitely seeming like she wanted to get the person who was causing that noise out of her pasture. I stepped in front of her and patted her, saying, "Oh, Pua, it's okay, just go somewhere else." But she was not interested in my comfort. She was off after David again. She had less than zero interest in me and was laser focused on chasing David out of the pasture. David, probably wisely, dropped the offending T-post driver and started trotting away across the pasture to just try to get her to lose interest. But instead of losing interest, she followed right after him at an impressive trot. David picked up speed and ran towards the gate where she followed him. When he turned to run back towards me, she definitely followed him again with determination and purpose, to the point that both of us thought it would be better to just let her chase David out of the pasture for now. I have to admit, friends, at this point I was laughing. I probably shouldn't have been, but watching this little pig run David around the pasture really tickled me. He ran all the way out and over the gate, where Pua stopped and grunted at him to let him know she did not want him coming back in. This prompted a series of pasture-side internet searches by David while I finished getting the T-post attached to the sagging fence, because again, Pua was not interested in me and just left me alone, choosing instead to stand by the gate and guard David with a gimlet eye. As it turns out, this is a known thing, albeit unknown to us at the time. Pigs are really sensitive to high-pitched clanging noises, and Pua knew exactly who was making this particular high-pitched clanging noise. It bothers them, and sure enough can prompt them to try to get rid of the sound. David even claims to have found a site that insists this is where the expression clanging around a pig comes from. No one else in our family could find evidence that this expression actually exists or had ever heard of it, but after seeing Pua's reaction, I'm adding it to my expression rotation. Clanging around a pig definitely provokes a rapid and unexpected reaction. David and Pua have begun making up. Pua immediately accepted behind the ear scratches from him that evening, and she was willing to flop over for a belly rub from me, though not from David. And we seem to be back to normal, although we now know we will not be doing fence work when she is nearby. We can also understand why the big bad wolf was ultimately defeated by a smart and enterprising pig, because when they set their minds to something, it seems like they can get what they want. Given their intelligence, their usefulness and efficiency as grazers, and their friendliness, except for when we decide to do fencing and they need to set some boundaries with us, it's hard to believe that in the late 1970s, Kunekunes almost went extinct. It is estimated that at that time there were only around 50 purebred Kunekunes left in existence. Thanks to a lot of dedicated breeding work by preservationists, they were saved and now number in the thousands. They are no longer facing extinction. In fact, when we went to look for pigs, we saw multiple listings of kunekunes for sale, so clearly they're thriving in our area. I'm interested to see how things continue to go with our new trio. Will they accept the lambs once we let them spend more time together? Will they continue to surprise us with new and amusing behaviors? I think yes on both counts, but time will tell. For now, I'm enjoying the learning process during our new pig adventure, and you can catch photos and videos of them on our Instagram at Foggy Oak Fairy Tales or on our Facebook at Foggy Oak Farm. They are pretty funny and cute, so I recommend checking those out. And please take a moment to rate and review this podcast if you haven't had a chance to yet. It really helps us reach new people and keep the podcast going. Thanks, and see you next time.